Hi, my name is Ronit,
And I'm Raeed.
and we're both computer science students here at the university. Along with Cindy and Edward, we're building Classbop, a platform that gives students a voice in the classroom and empowers teachers by giving them access to analytical and actionable feedback. During my freshman year, I was lucky enough to meet one of the most awesome and genuine people out there. His name was Paul, and his story is one that really resonates with me. Growing up, Paul was a creative, curious, and ambitious kid, fascinated by computers. But like a lot of students, he often felt like he didn't belong at school. Half of the time he couldn't keep his eyes open, and the other half he couldn't keep up with the rehearsed lessons that felt like they were going at two times speed. One day he was sitting in calculus class, looked up at the board dumbfounded, and for the second week in a row, felt like he was looking at alien language. He came home later that day, broke down in tears, and from that day on, never put in an ounce of effort into high school again. He ended up going to community college and assumed his career dreams were over. But there, for the first time, his teachers cared about what he thought. He had actual input into the pace at which he learned, how the content was delivered, and at times, even the content itself. He ended up getting straight A's in all of his classes, got accepted into U of M, and now works as a software engineer at Facebook. A few years ago, I was mentioning the story to one of my high school teachers who had been nominated for a presidential teaching award for his practices around student feedback, and asked him why it was so rare for teachers to establish feedback systems in their classes. He told me, Ron, and most of us barely have time to check our email. Forget creating a feedback system. Not to mention that 90% of us couldn't use Microsoft Excel if our lives depended on it. And we've tried to think about that a lot during this past year. And from speaking with so many teachers in interviews, I think more than anything, we've learned that education is a partnership between students and teachers. And for it to truly advance, both parties need to be involved. And this intimidating issue is what we're trying to tackle with ClassBot.
To clarify, the problem we sought to solve was the lack of a systematic feedback loop between students and teachers. This missing piece leaves students feeling alienated and under pressure in school. Meanwhile, teachers are unable to adapt and tailor their content methods to best help the students, as well as discover ways to improve their teaching. And this isn't just a problem at certain high schools either. $7.3 billion is spent yearly on teacher turnover, and that's just in public schools. Teacher attrition has also risen 50% in the last 15 years. Providing teachers with the necessary tools to succeed can lower these statistics and put that money to better use, be it into the hands of teachers or resources for schools. Additionally, 51% of teachers currently feel that performance reviews from school leaders are minimal to not at all useful, whereas numerous peer-reviewed studies conclude how effective student feedback is, one with over 230 citations stating that there is little disagreement as to the effectiveness of student ratings on teacher improvement. In short, our solution and current prototype is an all-in-one feedback web platform for teachers to create repeating feedback forms and formative check-ins. They receive responses with detailed analytics that show their growth and improvement, as well as key highlights and areas to focus on. Unlike Google Forms and other current methods of getting feedback, teachers can manage all their surveys in one place and can save time by typing in questions just once. They simply set beforehand what days is not the survey and when to stop, instead of having to create and send these surveys again and again. Then, all the data is automatically graphed out for them over time, so they can easily spot trends, see which topics students are struggling with, how they're feeling, and what teaching strategies they like. More importantly, they can see how their students are feeling before an assessment is already over.
Since we began working on this, we've made a bit of progress as well. Over the summer, we learned web development outside of our jobs and built a working prototype by the end of the summer. And over the past year, to further work on the idea, we've been a part of Dare to Dream and ZLI, the Ann Arbor Spark Bootcamp, Learning Levers, Optimize, and of course, Innovation in Action. Through these experiences, we've had Zoom interviews with over 45 teachers and technology directors and built relationships with notable people from the Michigan EdTech community, from the State EdTech Committee and the superintendent on the State Board of Education to previous successful founders in EdTech to relevant mentors right here from Innovation in Action.
From speaking with these people, one thing we've learned is that teachers are underfunded, which is why our beachhead target market is selling our product as licensed software to district EdTech directors, specifically high school districts to start off with. This is because high school teachers see their students more often and thus have more opportunities to be flexible to student feedback. We're currently in the process of testing our prototype, and we're starting to hear back from a couple of teachers who are willing to give us feedback, and we're speaking to some schools about doing a larger pilot. We hope that this process will fix any major bugs we find, but more importantly, give us an idea of how teachers feel about the project and also what functionality they would want to add. We plan to use the summer to refine the prototype and add new features so that in the fall, we can continue testing with the new site and be ready to launch an updated version in 2022. The primary uses for our funding will be our monthly cost of hosting, database, and marketing, and we'll also use some of the funding for search engine optimization and domain name costs.
Very briefly, I wanted to touch on why I think that we're the right people to address this problem. And in short, it's because we want to do it the right way by talking and working together with teachers, because we're students ourselves and as a result have stake in the issue, and because we think that our background is well suited for it. Our experience in technology gives us a strong technical base, and we were able to self-learn most of what we needed to build our prototype. We also cold emailed hundreds of teachers and administrators, which led to the many relationships that we built, and sought out diverse programs to be a part of that were conducive to our project, like IIA. And before we end, I'd like to share this quote from a famous German poet. The world of knowledge takes a crazy turn when teachers themselves are taught to learn. We want to help push education in the right direction, and with your help, I think we can accomplish just that. And with that, I'd love to take any questions that you all might have. That's it.
Thank you for your presentation. This is a really interesting tool. As a teacher myself, trying to collect feedback is, it can be a challenge. So a couple of questions that I have are, you said that you're going to market this to districts, school districts. Have you interviewed districts to find out whether this is something they need or they want to implement into their districts?
Yeah, so we, throughout our interviews with teachers, we also spoke to a lot of like ed tech directors who we found like for public school districts, like they're the ones who generally will like start the process of approving like some new software, like licensed software, and then it'll get approved by like the superintendent and the board. And we found that from speaking to them, they told us like the main factors were like integrating with LMSs and having like single sign-on, which is something that we recently added. And they basically were giving us like things that they required, and we're trying to like check off those things so that in the future they would want like this.
Yeah, from what we heard with the technology directors that we spoke with, and a lot of technology like instructional coaches who work with teachers, they did tell us that like teachers do face issues, especially in with virtual schooling, to collect feedback from students, just because like especially with virtual, it's harder to see like how students are feeling. And from what they told us, they make purchasing decisions, not solely based off of what teachers want, but obviously they give a lot of weight into what teachers feel like they're struggling with and what they think that would help. And so from speaking to teachers, I think we've basically surmised that like this is like a real issue that teachers face. And so based on that, we think that this is something that technology directors would spend money on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And just another question. The focus seems to be on K through 12. Have you thought at all about, university level program or anything that would be for other types of educational institutions?
So our theory, I guess, is that we think it'll be most useful in high school because that's where like students are like still like mature, but the teachers see them like often enough where they can like be like flexible to the feedback and like change like week like topics on the daily to like adjust to how students are like what students are struggling with. Our initial thought was that maybe in college, since like with 2 lectures a week, it might be more difficult. But I think in testing, we're hoping to like validate that that's true, and like we're looking to test with like I guess all types of teachers, including like professors at universities.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is that we just want to start off with high school, the high school market, just because we think that like Raeed mentioned, it's just the consistency of teachers and their students to make changes.
Thank you.
I have a question around the impact. So I definitely can see the need for feedback loops, but how are you defining how this will affect teacher success outcomes?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And um, teachers actually have been pretty vocal about, and actually not just teachers, but technology directors as well, expressing concern that like this data that is collected from student feedback isn't used negatively against the teachers. Um, and even from speaking to Ann and Aaron, we've realized that, and of course teachers themselves, is that certain types of teachers may be biased against more, which obviously is not an outcome that we want to happen. And so I think we've made the decision to just keep the data private to teachers and not share any of the data with anyone else, whether that be administrators or technology directors, whoever whoever else. The data is private to teachers only. So essentially, the whole goal of the data is to help teachers improve and help their students, rather than be some sort of metric to unfairly judge them or do something like that. So that's one example of how we've thought about hopefully providing a positive outcome of the application.
Got it. Can you speak a little bit more about the team's background?
Yeah. So me and Raeed are both computer science students. I'm a business minor, and then Edward and Cindy are also technical. And I think they're both statistics students, which kind of works well with our data-oriented application. And they're both computer science students as well. So we have a pretty technical base across the board.
Can you just speak a little bit more about the teachers, the number of teachers that you've spoken to?
Yeah. So we've emailed maybe like in the hundreds, but of course not everyone has the bandwidth to respond and meet with us. So I think we've actually met with about like 40 to 45 teachers and administrators. And from speaking to those, after just like gathering insights and just trying to learn about their problems, um, we've also followed up with a few of them that expressed like a lot of interest in what we were building. And we're starting to kind of help them integrate it into like their daily like curriculum and classroom. And so we're starting to get feedback from them. And that's kind of the next process. And that's about just about 5 to 6 teachers that we're working with directly for that.
Great. And you talked, you just mentioned a little bit about the concern of bias in getting feedback, and how are you designing this to address that issue? Because that definitely is a concern for teachers, knowing that sometimes the feedback that they're getting is definitely has there's implicit bias in it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the main thing is just to, at least for now, is just to make sure that like no sort of bias can be used against them in terms of like negatively impacting their career or their performance. And then in terms of helping students actually provide unbiased responses, I think we can provide better prompting and on the teacher side when they're selecting questions to maybe alert them of potential bias in student responses. But of course, I think we need to do a lot more testing to see like how we can actually make an impact on the student side to reduce biasing, because that's a pretty intimidating issue. And I'm not sure, um, our current solution would actually help prevent students from providing non-biased answers, to be completely honest, because that's just something, that's difficult. I don't know if technology can necessarily help with that. But of course, I think we're going to speak with teachers and try to figure something out for that.
Thank you.
Can you speak about your sustainability plan?
Yeah, so I think, like we mentioned, our goal, at least to start off with, is to sell this to like districts as a whole rather than individual teachers or departments. And so our plan is to sell it as like a monthly subscription fee to school districts. Um, and so yeah, our sustainability plan is to start off with high schools and kind of see like what the feedback is there, make some like incremental adjustments, improvements, maybe even major changes based on what the feedback is. And then based on the conversations we have with technology directors there, maybe move on to middle schools and lower. And obviously we have to make design changes to, you know, account for the lower age group there. Um, and then I think along with that, we also, like you mentioned, think about expanding to universities. And again, probably would have to make some design changes to account for the different situations. Um, and I think all universities have a slightly different sales cycle than high schools, just in that there's going to be more people involved and it might be slightly longer. But that's essentially the main goal, is to first start off with high school and then expand as we get feedback.